I thought they might have thought twice, since they talk about Arctic sovereignty all the time, that it was a bad idea to close the Pearl Research Center in Eureka on Ellesmere Island, which is of all scientific establishments in the Arctic operated by any nation on Earth, the one closest to the North Pole, in which Canadians have invested over $10 million in the best instrumentation and researchers there who are doing work on atmospheric science and climate, and it is uniquely situated to do that work. I thought they might save it, but no, it is dead. They will not fund it. I thought they might do something more for science, and funding to the National Research Council is included. I don't know if I can find the right spot, but I remember exactly what it says. The National Research Council funding will now be focused more on business-led and relevant scientific information. Yes, here it is, page 53 of the budget when you get a chance. The National Research Council refocuses on business-led, industry-relevant research. So the takeover of our country is nearly complete. We have no one really investigating election fraud. We have the oil industry running the government. Some of you may know I'm a practicing Christian, and sometimes I get in trouble. People say, don't you know that you have to separate church and state? And I say, of course, the institutions of church and state must be separate. We need a whole other debate now. We need to separate oil and state. You know, I go to events in Ottawa. They're all sponsored by Enbridge, the Governor General's Award for the Performing Arts, where it's a gala at the National Arts Centre. It is where the leading Canadian creative talent is lauded by our government, by the Governor General as head of state, and at everywhere you turn it says brought to you by Enbridge. You go to the events to celebrate the famous five and women's achievements in Canada, brought to you by Enbridge. I went to a dinner the other night. How weird was this? But I got invited to the dinner to celebrate, well, I'd worked on it, the 21st anniversary of the Canada-US Acid Rain Accords. John Baird hosted the dinner. Brian Mulroney was the guest. And I wondered, it turned out to be really weird. There were only 20 people at this dinner. I was the only woman. That was even weirder. And I looked around the table, and I recognized most of the people as being colleagues from in the day, the fight to stop acid rain, but then there were a whole bunch of men I didn't know. It turned out that CIBC had sponsored the dinner, so a whole bunch of CIBC folks were at the table too. I'm waiting for the day when I walk into Parliament and take my seat in the House of Commons that my desk says, brought to you by Enbridge. We are losing our notion of government representing the will of the people, that includes protecting the environment, that includes even having a national energy strategy to say, where do we want our oil to go? Do we want to ship bitumen crude to China? Do we want China owning the oil sands, which they increasingly do? Do we want to have a government that's decided that environmental assessment is just red tape in the way of progress? This government takes us back to a day which I never have experienced this day in my own lifetime. I only know it through the oral history my mother used to tell me. My mom used to tell me that when I got involved in the environmental movement, she said, you know, it's so different. When I was a kid and we'd sit in the dark movie theater and we'd wait for some, the latest picture from Hollywood, wait to see Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. And while she was sitting there in the theater, they had sort of a movie trailer that was actually what we now have as the television news. And she said there were always these black and white movie trailers where the theme was, man conquers nature. Progress, we are building dams, look at this, we're marching ahead. This Stephen Harper budget is about conquering nature and silencing, punishing environmental groups. It's about ignoring First Nations. It's about proceeding on a course to run up our greenhouse gas emissions as fast as possible with no concern for the morrow. All I can think is, and I've found no evidence that he understands or believes in the climate crisis, that he's a denier. I don't see any other explanation. I focus on Stephen Harper personally for a couple reasons. I've worked in many governments. I worked in one. Prime ministers in this country do have a lot of power, no matter what party, no matter what person. But there's never been so much centralized power as there is right now. There's never been such control on message. And we have never seen a Canadian government willing to say, we don't care if fishery habitat is destroyed. We don't care if there might be oil spills. We don't care even that there be more jobs by processing bitumen in Canadian refineries rather than shipping it by tanker to China. We don't care if there's never been a cumulative environmental assessment of the Gulf of St. Lawrence before we announce that it's now a policy goal to have offshore oil and gas developed in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. This is a government that has declared war on the environment. It's not just weak, not just lip service. It's a whole different matter from any government I've ever faced. And because it's one person, that's where I come to my main point. I really think it's time that we start saying out loud and encourage others to say, we can't afford to have Stephen Harper in 24 Sussex Drive till 2015. He's got too much time to do too much damage. And if we can take the course that British Columbians did without really knowing we were going to do it, when Gordon Campbell won his majority government, and it was actually a real majority, he got the majority of votes, he was Premier of British Columbia, but he brought in the HST, and it was so unpopular that he was hounded out of office in less than a year. Why do we all accept the idea that we're stuck with this? This is destroying not only the fabric of our country in terms of our criminal law system, our respect for human rights, for women's rights, but at the most fundamental level, this is sabotaging the very short window of the narrow window of opportunity we still have to take the action that's required to avoid runaway global warming, to take the action that's required to ensure that the climate change, well, it is a crisis, the climate crisis, is contained before we go to worst case scenarios. We still have that time. We don't have much time. So that's why I'd like to suggest to you that this budget represents the last budget Stephen Harper will deliver to Canada. This is the last overreaching, because he's finally really out of the closet as someone who's against the environment, against nature, against our future. And if we don't decide right now to mobilize, and I don't know exactly how, I'm not saying how exactly, but if we don't start saying as a people, we didn't vote for this. This isn't right. You can't take away environmental assessment law. You can't silence your critics and gag your scientists and cut their funding and destroy what has taken decades to develop in this country. So I'm grateful to all of you for coming out tonight. I'm going to stop talking about the budget, and we're going to stop talking altogether and see what questions and comments and ideas you have. I just want to say very clearly, this is our country, this is our future, and I don't think that as Canadians we can allow our Prime Minister to be the enemy of our planet. Thank you.